The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions. How's it going?
Better. Like, just
Good.
in a non-specific way, but also in the specific way that people who listen to the other episodes know exactly what I mean.
Because there are some people that like know the canon, right? So they've watched all the episodes. They listen to them when they come out, so they actually get the timeline, and then other people kind of dip in and out, and both are fine. But if you watch Lower Decks and you haven't watched TNG, 90% of it's a blast, but you don't get those extra like little 10% inside jokes.
And that ratio is critical, right? Like, we can wink to the camera at most 10% of the time, right?
Yes.
If it becomes a 50-50, like, oh, well, you didn't read the books that are supplements to the movie that are supplemented by the TV show. Like, I don't want to become Marvel. We're not going to have a cinematic nostalgia goggles universe. Not at the rate we make money off of this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, we can just, once in a while, you open up a crate and it's just like, oh, hey, look, it's a bunch of data dolls. It's like, are you sure they're all datas? Some of them might be lores. Yeah, some of them might be lores. Like stuff like that.
Yeah. But if we opened up that crate and it was full of money, then I would do a whole cinematic universe.
Literally, we have a whole new tier of Patreons to show exactly what we're willing to do for money.
A crate of money tier. Oh, Lord. George, what did we finally play after talking about it for like several years?
Several years. I mean, probably since Civilization 6 came out.
Probably. Yeah, we might be able to timestamp this like down to a day.
Yeah. Civilization 6 came out. Oh, yeah, I started playing Civilization 6. Hey, you know what we should do? We should play Civilization 2, which is what we played.
Yeah, which I didn't realize how much iterating happened over the first like 3 or 4 games. Like 2 is very different from 1, which is very different from 3, right? And then like 4 kind of refines it a little, and then 5 refines it a lot, and then 6 refines it a lot, right? So there's this wide top of the funnel. And so I think what's interesting about that is, like, for me, Civilization 2 is my nostalgic civilization. And if someone else says their nostalgic civilization is 1 or 3, you may have like nothing in common because they were still trying so many different things in not the game, the underlying game part, but like what made it Sid Meier's Civilization. So just like, oh, what's your favorite, classic civilization? Like, the answer to this question is meaningful. So think hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like, hey, do you play D&D? I do. Which edition? Second. Cool. I think this conversation is over because you might as well said no, like.
Yeah, I'm afraid I have nothing additional to add.
Yeah. But which edition do you play? Fourth? What do we do if they say fourth, Dad? Well, then we ask them very kindly but firmly to leave.
What do we do if they say fourth, Dad? Well, you hold up your holy symbol and say, not today, Satan.
I actually saw a meme recently where it said, somebody says, not today, Satan, and it just says Satan. You've rescheduled our plans several times. Is it something that I said, or? I
mean, the devil has feelings too.
Yeah, I mean, like the devil can apparently be negged,
Maybe that's why he's such a jerk.
Yeah, right.
People are always treating him like crap.
I mean, if you believe Paradise Lost, that is it. But anyways, what is your nostalgia experience for this?
Oh, wait.
Before we start going into Milton.
Yeah, I know, right? I got to do the top of funnel stuff. February 29th, this came out on February 29th. That's funny. 1996. So this is actually a contemporary of like several of the PC games we've done recently.
Wait. So it came out February 29th, 1996. That means it's only like, what?
Oh, you're doing
5 years old?
Yeah, it only counts in years that have a 29.
Yeah. So we screwed up because this isn't 20 years old.
way too recent. Originally on the PC and unbelievably later ported to the PS1. Just, I cannot imagine trying to interact with they must have had a completely different UI, I hope, because oh my God. But so what is this game if you've never heard of it? This is a inexplicably isometric 4X game, which is explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. From the golden age of PC strategy games. There are 3 paths to victory, and I'm actually glad I read this in the Wikipedia article because I didn't know one of these. So you can kill everybody else, right, or conquer them, right, and you run the world. You can build a spaceship that successfully reaches the Alpha Centauri star system. So just getting to space travel isn't enough, which I didn't know that. You have to, not die. But then the ending that I didn't even know was an option is if you just survive until 2020 AD, the game just ends. And your score is just tallied against the other civilization's scores, which I thought was kind of interesting. Like I don't think modern incarnations of the game have the like calendar cutoff victory, but I'm pretty sure I never went that way, right? It was like bloodlust or bust.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for me it was, I mean, again, like I would typically do what you, I believe, affectionately called the Wakanda
yes
strategy.
Yeah. Hunker down and science up.
Yep, exactly. To where, people come in and they're like, oh, I see that you have only city walls and some people holding weird sticks. I will destroy you with my pikeman. It's like, oh, that's a machine gun, actually. Let me show you how it works.
Stand over there.
Yeah. And like, oh, you have a catapult? Let me show you my trebuchet.
I guess I'll start with my nostalgia experience. So I just played like the mess out of this game, but I don't know where it came from. Like I don't know why we had this game. I don't remember asking for it. I don't remember borrowing it from anyone. So it is possible that this was maybe my older brother's, and so I just played it because it was around, right? Like on the family PC in the dining room. And yeah, so I, like a lot of games from this era, I have pretty clear memories of like how they came into my sphere, but not this one. It was just about it. It's not impossible, though it is kind of unlikely. Like maybe it literally came with a PC. Like we bought a Packard Bell and it was bundled in if you bought the monitor too. I don't, who knows? But I played this game a lot and realized when we were getting ready to do this episode, I think this might actually be the only civilization I've played besides 4. I played 4 briefly when it was new, and I don't remember why I bailed on it, but I played it briefly, but I played the mess out of this one and only this one. So thinking about how different the early games were is like, oh, maybe I bounced off the series because of this game. Maybe I loved this game and I tried the others and they scared me off because they were different. Like I honestly don't know. And of course I couldn't do any additional research. So here we are.
Yep. Yeah, no, pretty similar. Actually, I remember how this one came into my sphere was I was in middle school when this, like I learned about Civilization 2. And a couple of funny things was, one is that I got this from a friend, if memory serves. And no, I'm sorry, I take that back. I gave this to a friend. I had it and I gave it to a friend. And so he was technologically savvy and I was not. And so initially, what my first attempt to give it to him was I was like, oh, I'll just put it onto a floppy disk, right? And it was way too big for that. But I was like, that's fine. I'll just put it onto several floppy disks. and so I did, and I gave him like the stack, and I remember handing it to him and him being like, oh, this doesn't bode well.
This doesn't do what you think this does.
Yeah, but he said like, I'm sorry, what did you do? And I explained it to him. He said like, and he gave me a Lions level analogy, and he was whatever, like 12 at the time or 10, right? But he said George, this isn't going to work. And I was like, well, I gave you all the files. And he said, this would be like me cutting you into several pieces and putting you into different boxes and expecting you to function when you got to where you were going.
Yeah. The one person who we know can do that is it Dr. Manhattan? It's like the first thing I learned how to do was put myself back together.
But yeah. And then I played, like you said, played the ever loving mess out of this game. It was on the computer in the spare bedroom, which meant that, I could just sit there and play forever. And I also remember when I kind of put the game down and then didn't pick it back up, which was, I had like stacks on stacks on stacks of musketeers and was just throwing bodies into the river, like choking their rivers with my dead with this one city that I was trying to capture. And it just wasn't working. And like everyone was in revolt. I was like bankrupt because of all of the time and energy I was throwing at like trying to overthrow this one thing. And then I was like, I'll come back to this. And I just didn't. And then I picked up Civilization 6.
And then a scant 2 decades later, you found a new game.
Yeah, I was oh yeah, Civilization. I remember liking Civilization. Let's try Civilization 6. And then when I first started playing it, I was like, what are these districts? This is new and different, and I don't like it. And now I went back to this. And I'm like, where are all the districts? This is old and different, and I don't like it.
I mean, you jumped 4 iterations. Like that's a bunch. Shall we shill?
We shall shill.
So if you like what we're up to and you want more of this mess, make sure you like and subscribe, as the youths say. It's the easiest way for you to get new episodes. Just subscribe to the show. Don't make it difficult. Don't be weird about this. If you want to support what we're doing, you can find us on the internet. I stream a lot of the games we play. I didn't stream this one, I think, more than twice because it's an old Windows game and it was a pain in the ass and I just wasn't willing to put up with it. So I stream most of the games we play, but this one only got like 1 or 2 streams. If you want to go above and beyond and support us a little bit, I find ratings are good, referrals are better. So find another civilization, invade one of their cities, and force their people to listen to an episode you think is a game they might enjoy listening to an episode about. That's probably the best thing you can do. You can also give us money. If you give us money, you get the after show. Everybody, all levels, gets the after show. And if you support us at a high enough tier, you actually get your name shouted out on the show. So first, we need to thank our 8-bit classics, Jacob,
a supreme settler,
Yarno,
an accurate archer,
Jason,
a capital cannon,
John,
a healthy horseman,
and Kevin,
an unparalleled pikeman,
and our 16-bit hero, Michael,
a malevolent musketman. And the reason why is because once you get musketmen, it's all downhill for whoever I mean, like that's the big one. If you can get gunpowder reasonably before everyone else, you become what was it, the gray goo, right? You become the gray goo.
Yeah. So we need to talk about the audio visuals before we dig into this. But
real fast.
I'm sorry. The $1,000 tier.
The $1,000 tier. Yeah. So for $1,000, Lions and I will write a song in your honor about how you gave us $1,000.
I would do that totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, call my bluff. Give me $1,000.
Yeah. I mean, you get our level of song making skill, but
that's true. That's the real. That's the hitch. So, but I want you to please remember that thread about once you get gunpowder, like that's whoever gets gunpowder first, that can really upset the balance of the game.
Yeah, it does.
Because I have a question for you kind of about your hunker down and science up strategy. Dude, I don't love the visuals in this game, except the visuals that I do love. But here's the thing. Pixel art, and this isn't a problem we have actually had to deal with a lot for most of the games that we've played, I think. But games that are, from the 80s, well, we actually have played a couple games from the 70s. Games that are from the 70s, 80s, and 90s that were pre-polygons were often relying on the fact that CRTs blurred the pixels together, right? And that wasn't like they knew that happened. It's not like they saw the world blurry, right? It's just like our great grandparents didn't see everything sepia toned. So they knew like, oh, if we put these 2 colors next to each other, or if we do this like dithering pattern, it will create this blended look, right? And a lot of Super Nintendo games, a lot of Genesis games, even if they used those strategies, like Sonic the Hedgehog relied on that strategy a lot, but when you sharpen up the pixels on modern screens, actually still looks great. This game, not as much. A lot of the like little faces when you're looking at a city look like terrifying monsters. The icons, the little tokenized, settlers and soldiers and stuff on the overworld map are just like weird, jagged messes. Like there's a lot of information on screen, and they built it to work on a CRT monitor, and it just doesn't look great on a modern screen. It just really doesn't.
No, it doesn't. So agreed. The visuals, for the sake of visuals, they don't look great, right? Also, there's a whole bunch of stuff that they don't do mechanically, right, for heavy lifting purposes. So, for example, it doesn't let you know what the resource output is on the map, right? So like,
like of a given tile,
right?
Yeah.
So you don't. So if you're going to settle one, it doesn't let you know inherently what tiles on the map that city will be able to access if you settle there, right? Which is critically important. You just have to kind of internalize that. And then you also kind of have to internalize, oh, right, well, this bland green tile does this, or hey, that, and then they have like specialty tiles, right? They have special resources, but you have really no idea what those are going to be until you settle there and then internalize that. Maybe it's in the manual, but I will never know.
I also didn't read the manual for this one because I was like, nah, I remember. And then I saw the Microprose logo at the loading, and I was like, oh no, Microprose. This probably came with a dictionary-sized book, and I was like, nah, I'll figure it out. It's fine.
And to be fair, you can figure it out, right? But and so one of the things that we discussed, that I'm not going to do is I'm not going to sit here and say that Civilization 6 is better. It is, but that's not the point. But what I am going to do is when I point out a flaw, I'm going to I might say how Civilization 6 addressed this problem. The way Civilization 6 addressed this problem is that they addressed it. Like
they didn't not address it.
Right. You just hover over tile and it'll tell you what it will produce. Right. And that's very, very helpful. Right. It also didn't. One of the other visuals that I didn't really see that would have been really helpful is they don't give you any idea visually. One, so like, let's say you're going to go take over a town. I didn't see a way to know what I was getting into when I went to go fight that town.
I think later when you have spies and diplomats, you can get information about other civilizations and the specifics of their cities, but I never engaged with spies and diplomats. I just figured if I send enough people with guns, it'll be enough.
And not a bad strategy, right? But what Civilization 6 does is it literally will tell you the approximate outcome of what the action you're about to do, right? Which is really helpful in a 4X strategy game, right? So literally at one point I saw somebody go in, they captured one of my cities and then they left, to go capture one of my other cities, right? And so then I was like, well, now I will go capture your unguarded city. But there was another guy there that I didn't know about. And then all of a sudden it wiped out my unit. And I was like, well, that's not a decision I would have made given an option. And you could definitely make the argument that it's more realistic because, yes, when you're a general, you don't know the exact, information of the opposing force, except that you have a gist, right? Like if you are an accomplished general, which ostensibly people leading these units are, right? They should be able to say like, this is going to go well, moderately, or terribly, right? But they're not just going to, throw their bodies onto a pile because the person in charge says, I don't know. I don't even know if there's anybody in there, right?
I don't know. The whole room might be empty. Well, and to keep this like rooted a little bit just in the way the visual information is presented is you don't have clear indicators of some of this information. Some of it is completely inaccessible. Some of it you can get later under circumstances that may not be obvious that later it will be accessible. And some of it is like in menus, right? And this game, unlike my beloved Master of Orion 2, right? You have Civ 6, I have Master of Orion 2. Like right clicking does not solve most of your problems. And to me, PC gaming problems should be solved by right clicking. Like if I don't know what a thing does or how a thing works and I right click on it, I should get something, right? And this is what I think is interesting is a 4X game, even to this day, right? But especially in the kind of early era of them where that this game was in that we were playing, they are walking a very high tightrope of we need you to have a tremendous amount of information, and we are still literally figuring out as an industry how to present that to you visually. Like, do we have a million like in Google Maps, like you can turn off like different layers of the map. Like, do we have a million visual layers where it's like, like in SimCity, like you could see the electronics grid or the electric grid, you can see the plumbing grid, you can see the traffic grid. Like that's one way to handle that the SimCity games did, right? Master of Orion put everything behind a right click. And this game kind of does neither. Like some information you just don't have, or you don't get it until later mechanically. And so you find, or I found myself, and it sounds like you found yourself constantly contending with, do I not know where this information is in the UI? Or is this information that the game does not afford me because mechanically they've made that decision, which is weird to think. I don't know if I'm just looking in the wrong place and it's a simple like HUD issue, or if I'm not supposed to know this, or I'm supposed to intuit this through other like, goat bone jangling that I don't know I'm supposed to be doing. Like that's a problem if you don't know if it's a limitation of the HUD or a limitation of the mechanics.
Agreed. And so, yeah. So again, there's and again, for its time, this is 93, right? They
96.
96. So, but they're throwing science at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? So a lot of the commonalities, had not been established yet for this type of thing. But that being said, is that there is a ton of information that you need to know, and not most of it is not very represented very easily, accessibly on like a HUD or something like that, and it doesn't visually let you know like, oh hey, if you do thing A, then thing B will happen. And actually, now I'm thinking about it, I'm kind of thinking about this on the fly, which is that when you really, what they don't do, and this is a little bit more mechanical, but they don't visually give you a visual when you are about to make a game-changing decision, right? Or something that could change the trajectory of the game. So if you're about to make a decision that's going to lose you a unit, you need some type of visual that says, hey, it's fine if you want to make this decision, but this is going to be the outcome. Are you cool with that? They're entirely fine with you being like, oh yeah. And literally at one point, I just, I thought that because I was using I wasn't always using the mouse. Sometimes I was using the arrow keys to move my persons, right? I thought that I was moving them up in an angle, but instead I moved them directly across into this city. And then they just died. And I was like, well, that's not what I wanted to do, but it's what happened. And so there was no visual indicator to say like, hey, this is going to result in defeat,
Well, and you will notice in the description of the game, I called it inexplicably isometric because Civilization 1 is not isometric, it's top down. And so is every civilization after this one, because not knowing exactly where you're going to move a unit is problematic, because what you don't want to do is have a million pop-ups that are like, are you sure this is where you want to move? Are you sure this is where you want to move? Are you sure this is where you want to move? So you need it to be low friction to take an action, but high confidence in what the action you're taking is. And literally the way the map is drawn lowers your confidence in the action of moving units, which you do a lot.
Right. And then the way that Civilization 6 addressed this is that anytime you go to move a unit, one, it's on a hex grid, right? And it shows you the grid, right?
Yes.
And so you just select the tile you want to go to, and it says, this will take you this many turns, and this is how this is going to go down. Also, too, with visuals, when you go to move, if you can't get there, it just goes, and this actually leads nicely into audio, right? It gives you one way to let you know that what you're doing is not possible. It goes, but it doesn't say, like
it's
I'm
a
like,
very wimpy buzzer noise.
Yeah, but I'm like, but at one point is, the Senate wouldn't let me go to war with the people I wanted to go to war with, which is just a huge disappointment.
I hate when they do that. Every time that popped up, I was like, we can go back to an earlier form of government, right?
Yeah, no, I literally at one point, it just shows the meme of like the person sweating, pushing the button, and it's just return to monarchy,
Democracy, monarchy.
You're like that's literally hovering over the monarchy button, being like, I don't have to deal with this. I am dealing with this by choice. Although weirdly, because of the way the science tree worked, and we'll get into that, I discovered democracy before monarchy. So, that was just kind of weird to me. But anyway, so there was a period where I was a democracy because that was ostensibly my only choice. Anyways, I say that to say, though, that it wasn't telling me why I couldn't get from point A to point B. It just said, nope, you can't get there. And I was like, am I getting too close to a city? Do I need to go up and around? What's the problem? It was just like, no. I was like, I don't know what's going on, man.
And those audio cues and some of the little visual cues are enough to indicate something is different. And this is a mechanical thing, but I'm not sure exactly where I would insert this. So here it comes. This game, I literally had to.
Sorry, name of your sex tape.
No, don't. You,
no, you can bleep it, but
don't you
M
rating up this show. I literally had to remind myself on one of my playthroughs. Right, the expectation is not that you win on the first try. The expectation is not necessarily that you win ever. You could draw a tremendous amount of enjoyment out of playing this game and not ever be victorious, right? Because it kind of does have a score. So if you just survived to 2020, it would tell you like what your score is, and you can actually check your score whenever you want. So the reason I say that is if you try to do something and it goes like, you can save scum essentially, right? Because early PC gaming is all about save scumming. So you can save scum and then just click a bunch of times and do micro experiments, or die and start a new game and be like, oh, I see. The reason I couldn't go over there is because I had a peace treaty with them, and you're not allowed to get within, like, military units can't get within a certain distance of other military units because of the peace treaty, right? Or, oh, when I see the little R on the shield, I didn't know what that meant because I clicked something without realizing it. Now I can see that a road is built, so now I know that that's going to build a road, right? And there is like little helper text and stuff that pops up, which is, I kind of think it was actually executed like pretty okay. The little like helper boxes that pop up, and you can turn them off once you know the game is played. But there's a lot of like fuck around and find out style of learning how the game is played, and I had to continually remind myself that is not a bug. Like, not everybody enjoys that, but the game was designed that way on purpose. Like they said, part of learning the game is failing and then starting over.
Well, and also this game is meant to be a 100, 200, 500 hour experience, like this isn't one where, this isn't God of War where you play it through and you go, oh, that was neat. And then you put it down. This is meant to be played iteratively hundreds of times, right?
Yeah. It's chess. It's not a novel.
Right. So, the good analogy. So when you go through and you meet another civilization for the first time, you're like, what are all of these weird veiny things all over the place? Roads. Apparently those are things that can be built. How could I go about doing that? And then you start like looking into it, you're like, okay, this is how I would do it. So the one of the audio notes is what do you think of the music, man?
What music?
Exactly.
So I looked into this the least I could without like doing research outside of the game. So in the game, right, because this is from an era of PC gaming where the HUD is not custom. The HUD is just windows and menus, like the same you would see in Microsoft Word, just menus and windows, right? Which is like that was part of what made the game difficult to stream, because if you were capturing the main game window, it didn't include any of the pop-up windows because those are literally separate windows. Like if you have two different applications open, right? Whereas like my streaming software is like, oh, that's a different window. You asked me only to show this window, right? It's, and I was just like, oh wow, this is like from a whole different era of like game and interface design and UI design.
It's like you saying, I speak English, you speak English, right? Yes, but I speak Old English. Is that okay? So, like Shakespearean English? No. Like Beowulf English. It's like, so we cannot communicate. Got it.
Exactly. Yes. So in the game, there is a menu that is literally something like play the goddamn music. Like, why is it so friggin' quiet? And if you try to interact with it, it says something like, where's the CD, buddy? And I said, I don't have the CD. I downloaded this game for free on Abandonware. And the game says, well, then you cannot have any music. So there are lots of little musical cues, right? Like when certain things happen, there's little musical cues. There's little audio cues, like when they upgrade your throne room, it's like the crowd cheering, right?
Yay!
So the entire game is not dead silent, but a lot of it is just the little arcade beeps and boops of like a unit moved, or a unit was promoted to veteran, or President's Day was celebrated in Rome or whatever, and the rest of the time it is silent, which is weird, which reminded me that this was one of those games that I listened to comedy albums while I was playing it, because the version I had when I was a kid also didn't have the like the multiplayer gold iteration that came with music. So that was kind of a letdown. I was like, yeah, I have access to unlimited music as an adult with the internet, but I want the game to have music. I want to hear the game music.
Yeah, I want the game to decide what my playlist, Yeah, no, actually, my note was it is deafeningly quiet. And so, which is interesting because, so what Civilization 6 does is, which I think is kind of nice, is that there is music, and it's actually specifically music indigenous to the different civilizations that you've been in contact with, right? So, like if you've gotten in contact with the Canada, it'll play "Oh Canada," like their thing. But the interesting thing is, as the ages get higher, right? So when you're in like the very, very beginning, it's all very simplistic music, and then the music becomes grander and fuller as the ages go on. So I say all of that to say that I'd be playing Civilization 2 and saying do 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 do, and I've got like this music in my head, and I was like, what? Oh, right, because my brain said you're playing a Civilization game. So I did have a soundtrack. My brain just went in and just said, click, turn this on. And I'm like, yeah. Oh, wait, no, that's all in my head. Oh, this is how people go crazy. All right. No, that's good.
No, I was a little disappointed just because I knew, like, I could remember some of the little tunes, like when you're first starting the game, there's like that tribal drums, right? When you're building the world, and it's like dun 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 dun, dun ba, 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 right? So there's like the game has music, and I bet the score that went with it is probably fine. But if I had to guess, I would say for either technical reasons or copyright licensing reasons or both, they didn't bundle the music into the core game, right? Like maybe the CD just didn't have enough room on it, or maybe some very smart person said, the licenses for the music is like really strict and crappy, and it's going to interfere with our ability to distribute the game. So let's distribute them separately. And then if the people who own the rights to the music turn out to be douchebags, which they almost always do, then we can just say, okay, then we'll just sell the game without the music, right? So that's speculative, but based on what I know about the games industry and the music industry, I would not be surprised if one or both of those things is true.
Right. So no, that makes anything else for audiovisual?
I cannot emphasize enough how high the barrier to entry was for, I don't know what these things do, which made this probably a great segue into the gameplay and the mechanics, because when I first sat down and I was like, okay, I recognize the settlers. Okay. Like I recognize kind of how the map is laid out, and okay, like I kind of remember some of this stuff. And then I pressed a button by mistake and a little symbol showed up on the little settler shield, and I was like, I don't know what that's going to do. Right. And so there was a lot of, basically, two roads diverged in a wood. I was like, I can either go read through all of the help menus that ship with this game, because they will, pages and pages and pages. Like if you are willing to do the reading, there is nothing in the game that is opaque. If you are hoping the game will just teach you, it actually makes a moderate effort to teach you, and they're trying not to be annoying, right? They're trying to give you the minimum you need to be successful without letting you just like flounder around. But if you just want the game to teach you through gameplay, which to be fair, it's 4X game. They can't really do that, right? There's so many systems and so many mechanics, but I wasn't always happy with where they drew the line on what would pop up a little helpful box. And then there were other times where, like, did you know when you're looking at a city, if you click on the city, it will optimize the distribution of resources seemingly between two toggles. So like if you click, it'll optimize it in this way, or if you click, it'll optimize it in that way. But one, I don't know if that's true. Two, I don't know why you have to click on it. Three, I don't know if there are other things that I'm doing that are happening as like knock-on effects from making that change, because that one didn't get a friendly little pop-up box. So I just clicked until the numbers looked like they were the numbers I thought that they maybe should be, right? And so like that, there's this like weird cliff you fall off of where the game is like, all right, we gave you the basics, like figure out the rest or go read the book.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was so for me, I did not know if you double click on the city, that it redistributes your resources. Because basically, again, one of the things that I am sure that the game can combat later, but I basically found my first order optimal strategy and then started doing that, right? And for me, it was because one of the things that it doesn't let you do is it doesn't let you not make anything, right? From what I could tell,
it will constantly pester you with like, this looks like a good place to build a city. Hey, but what are you doing? Okay, let's go study some science. Like, yeah, they won't let you just wander the wasteland.
Well, no, I'm saying though is that for each city, like it has to be working on a project.
Oh, also yes. So at the macro and the micro scale, yes, true.
Yes, yeah. So I say that to say that in Civilization 6, one is that generally speaking, because there would be times where the city had built all the things that I really wanted it to. I wanted it to sit there and make science. That's what I wanted it to do, But that wasn't really an option. Like, give it a thing to do that I didn't really want it to necessarily complete, especially because I'd be like, fine, build a stock exchange, even though the stock exchange costs 4 units to maintain and only gives you a 50% boost in gold. And I have 8 gold pieces, so this is a wash. Like it, whatever. Anyways, what Civilization 6 does is is you can pick, campus research grants or, hub, commercial hub project, but basically you can say, make me science. That's what I want you to do, is I want you to take all of your manufacturing and pour it into science. So I say all that though, to say that when I realized I'm like, oh, I can't do that. I have to be working on something. Somehow production then became my enemy. I didn't really want it to finish anything. So, but what was great is that once you build a harbor, harbors give you 2 food, right? Which is what most land gives you in and of itself, right? Or 1, right? And 3 trade and no production. So once I figured that out, and the trade is what gives you your science, and I was like, so I can kind of make it do science by making it, give it 0 production. So towards the end, most of the cities like 1 shield per turn that they were generating, and everything else was fishing, go fish, fill the world with fish, drain the oceans, And so, so that was kind of, like I said, like a little weird.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, I had the exact same experience, but my touchstone was Master of Orion 2, because I was like, how do I ask people to stop building things, go do science? Like, and so the way I worked around it was not your clever solution. It was, I just always had a thing for them to build that made us science better. Go build a library, go build a university, like all those things. All of my towns were defenseless, like utopias to research and academia. Right. But then, eventually, once other people started to come around, it was like, oh, now I need to build like a city wall or something. But since they, as far as I could tell, like you did, had to be building something, I made them build projects that made science happen.
Well, yeah, that was the thing, is once I had all the science stuff, I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do. Although the Adam Smith Trading Company, did you build that wonder?
I did.
Yeah, that one's banging. Because
so why did you jump on that one? Because I could tell you which one was my favorite and which one I thought was the funniest.
I jumped on that one just because it said everything that costs 1 gold or less to maintain is free now. And I said, oh, that's like a lot of the first things that you build, And so literally my total empire maintenance cost dropped from like 40 gold per turn to 15 gold per turn, which means that I don't need to have as high taxes anymore and dump all of that into science. So that's how I got to the science, right?
Yeah.
Is,
Now that's legit. The one that made my eyebrows go like, oh really, was Leonardo's workshop, because
I built that one. That's how it was.
yeah. Leonardo's, like, it was probably, I don't know, maybe like 10 games, like not all of them to completion, but just like different scenarios and stuff to experiment. And once I discovered what that one was, unfortunately, on like the 6th or 7th of 10 games, I was like, I would have been doing this the whole time. Because then all of my stupid warriors would instantly turn into riflemen.
Yeah, no, Leonardo's workshop is amazing. That one, and Isaac Newton's university. Pretty cool. Doubles the science output of a thing. So I had like one that was doing like 40 science per turn or something. And I was just like, oh, yes, 80 science per turn, you say. Go on.
So real quick, I completely forgot to mention during audiovisual, one of the things that I found exactly as charming in this game as I expected to was the little videos of your advisors, because they're kind of silly and they're kind of poorly acted, right? Because it's probably like the developers and like people from around the studio or his friends or whatever. I don't know. But I love that the luxury advisor is Elvis, just in every era, right? In the tribal era, it's Elvis. In the space age, it's Elvis. I just love, it's so dumb. It's so completely dumb, but it's silly and funny. And it held up exactly the way it did in my memory. Just like, oh, this is because the game is supposed to have some levity to it, right? So when you complete a great, is that what they're called? Great wonders or wonders?
Yeah. Wonder. Yeah,
you know, like pyramids and the Colossus and stuff. So you complete like a world wonder, and they have a little video that plays, and this is where you get your favorite tangential learning, right? Because for things like the pyramids, they show real footage of the pyramids and of the Sphinx. And for things like when you develop space travel, they show like real footage of the moon landing and like shots from different satellites and things that were publicly available at that time. And it's like, oh, this is cool because you're seeing why this was a big deal to humanity, because look at all this real documentation we have of this real thing that really exists in the real world. And then at the end of the little video, it tells you like, such and such counts as such and such. Like, now that you've learned what this thing is like and why it's important, here is the mechanical impact in the game. The one that really made me damn near do a spit take is the further you get into history, the more kind of like abstract the wonders are, right? So like space travel isn't a spaceship. It is the concept of space travel, right? Whereas the early wonders are literal physical things like the pyramids. One of the wonders you can get is women's suffrage. Did you unlock women's suffrage?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. If you unlock women's suffrage and you watch the little video, because you can very easily click out of it, unfortunately, and I don't know of a way to replay it. But at the end, it says, you know, there's like this like cursive-y font, and it says women's suffrage counts as a police station in every city. And I just went, what?
See, there's your tagline, right?
Well, and that honestly, because I'm an adult now and I understand that these games are supposed to be like rooted in reality, it made me sit back and go, do I not know what women's suffrage was and what its impact was? Like, that's not what I would have expected.
Yeah, I guess that because if I remember correctly, having a police state in every area reduces corruption, right?
Yeah. And so like the idea of like, oh, because now women are part of the democratic process and they've been empowered as citizens, like that reduces overall corruption in society. It's like, yeah, okay. But the phrasing is weird.
Functions, yeah. Yeah, because that's the thing, that is fascinating, because it is like it's trying to draw a corollary, basically saying like this counts as a police station in each area for the purposes of reducing corruption. So they created like a weird middleman, you know, because it would be like, if I said, you know, oh yeah, you know, I'm going to go work. I'm going to go work for a person, and they're going to give me, you know, $20 an hour. Right? They're giving a handle of monkey shoulder every 2 hours, and it's like, no, yeah. I mean, I guess because I could then exchange that money for whiskey, but that's a weird way to say that. But I mean, yes, you're not wrong. You know,
it's made me think of that scene in The Office where Dwight says he's going to pay everyone in Schrute bucks. And
oh yeah.
Stanley says, I will give you 1,000 Stanley nickels to stop talking about this. What's the exchange rate of Schrute bucks to Stanley nickels? What's the exchange rate of leprechauns to unicorns?
Exactly. No, that's fascinating. One of the differences with this one that, and I may have been misunderstanding this, but I don't think I was, which is that scientific discoveries are based off of your total science output, but it's just a certain number of turns, right? Every X turns, you will make a scientific discovery, right?
Yeah, based on your output.
Based on your output, right?
Yeah. So space travel is ostensibly more to unlock, but it's based on it's because there's multiple layers of abstraction. So it takes more science to unlock space travel, but because they give it to you in raw turns based on how much of your society's output is going into science, it's hard to say exactly like, oh, this is 10 times more complicated than unlocking this other thing, because there's 2 levels of abstraction.
Right. Because like what I looked at was that it just basically, when I would be setting, they have the window that says set your taxes, set your science, set your luxuries, right? And there it would say like, hey, if you set your science at 70%, then you're going to make a discovery every 5 turns. If you do it at 60%, it's going to be 6 turns, 7 turns, so on and so forth, right? And that's great. It makes for good and easy decision making. But the way I decoded that was that, is let's just say that for whatever reason, I never researched monarchy. So it's now between, space exploration and monarchy. It's like, oh, those 2 things take the same. And I'm like, that feels weird, so, and again, the way that even Masters of Orion does it is different science things actually require different research points, And one of the things that I thought about when I was playing Civilization 6, which is, I think, interesting, is that I don't know how Civilization 6 does it, but for sure. But basically is that, let's just say that you're like, all right, I'm going to go down this path. I'm not even going to worry about building boats. I don't care about boats. I'm landlocked. Screw that. I don't like the sea, right? No one has instilled in me a love of the sea, right? So I am never going to build a boat. So, but so you eventually, you start building sanitation. You're building all this sort of stuff. Well, eventually, it will just take you 1 turn to build to learn how to build a ship, right? But once it takes you 1 turn, it takes you 1 turn, right? So like even if it would take you 1/10 of a turn, it doesn't drop below 1 turn. So it does actually incentivize you to not get stupid on the tech tree, to eventually go back and research the old stuff, because it is suboptimal to not. But this one took it way far in the other direction, which was like, man, research whatever you want, whenever you want. And I'm like, well, I mean, heck, I don't really see any reason to go back and research some of these other things, because it's going to take me 5 turns to research conscription, which gives me riflemen, or go back and research a type of government that I'm never, ever going to use.
There's, and this is another like trial and error thing where you can probably exploit that in some ways that are game breaking if you understand how the tree works and what those things unlock. And to the game's credit, it's not like you would have to do a million iterations. There's literally a single button that will show you the entire tech tree and what everything unlocks, including the units and things you get from researching that thing. So like there's no guesswork, right? You may not know the impact of a building or of a particular unit or whatever, but you can look right away. The very first thing you can do is you can say, I think it's help, which shows you the broader tech tree in detail. And then there's goal, and goal will let you scan the tech tree and say, I want this. I want riflemen. Tell me what of the things I am currently have available to research will get me to riflemen. And that I thought was actually super cool, because there was a time, this information has gone out of my head now, but there was a time when I could have told you the shortest path to get the stellar converters in Master of Orion 2, because that is the I win the game technology in most circumstances. But I don't remember any way in the game to see that information. Whereas Civilization 2 is just like, here it all is. If you want to know how to get from, banging drums and killing animals with rocks to space travel, like we will tell you exactly how to get there from here, which is kind of an unrealistic amount of information for you to have access to, but it is nice.
Yep. Oh, agreed. One of the things that Civ6 does that is a little bit better, and so to your point, right, is that this is great, right? And this is the spoiled child I have become, by playing Civilization 6 first, is the one quality of life improvement in Civilization 6. If you say, I want gunpowder, it'll say, cool, we're on it. And then it automatically selects everything for you, as opposed to them, they say, well, pick thing A, thing B, thing C. And then you're like, okay, all right, so I'll pick thing A. And then it's like, okay, time for the next thing. All right, help me out again, man. I'm trying to get the gunpowder. How do I do that? Right? As opposed to just, we're on it. And it's like, great. You let me know if there's anything else you need. Let me know if there's anything else you need from me. I'm managing.
Well, and that gives you your like entitled douchebag visionary like experience where you get to just walk into a room and be like, someone should really cure cancer. And then it smash cuts to 50 years later. There's a bunch of exhausted, dead, burned out grad students, and somehow you are being praised for curing cancer.
Hey, we just gave you this Lifetime Achievement Award to your robot. No, why did I program my robot to make better decisions? Robot, experience this dramatic irony for me.
Well executed.
But yeah. So, anyways, that one of the other things. This is kind of a minor note, but this is the type of thing that will drive me to drink. Which is, you can put units to sleep, right? To just say, dude, just hang out, right? Because
they get a weird gray overlay.
yeah. Just like people do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, but so one of the things I've noticed with civilization games in general, right, is that it takes like X number of turns to get from point A to point B. Like it takes 200 turns and then the game will end, right? But how long those turns takes can vary wildly, right? So in the beginning, turns go by super fast, right? And then you can make it there was a while in the middle of a couple of my games where turns were also going by super fast because I had all of my units asleep and I kind of had everybody doing their thing. And I'm like, okay, just keep sciencing. That's all I want you to do. I want you to hunker down in science, right? I say all that though to say that, if you have a whole bunch of units and you're moving them around and stuff, that makes turns take forever, right? It becomes tedious. So most of the time, if I don't need the unit to be doing anything other than defending a city or there, if in case I need it, I would put it to sleep. It auto wakes up your unit if anybody just smells near them, and that's upsetting, because like literally at one point, as I was like, now and again, to comparatively in Civilization 6, you can put a unit into a defense mode and it won't wake up again unless somebody attacks it, right? Then it'll say, hey, this unit just took some damage. You want to do something about that? And then you could just say, nope, go back to resting.
Is that how Fortify works in this game?
Maybe.
I'm
not sure.
That might be how Fortify works, where it's like they stay fortified until you tell them otherwise.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't come to the realization that Fortify was a thing, so I just kept telling them to go to sleep. Anyways, I say that though to say that from my seat at least, when I was telling people, hey, go to sleep, and then somebody would walk by and wake up my unit, I said, no, go to sleep. Walk by, hey, you want to wait and go back to sleep. And then literally at one point, I was in a perfectly fine place, but I said, go to the edge of the earth so no one will ever wake you up again. I am so sick of dealing with your crap, conscripted knights or whatever they were, I'm done. And
so one,
they never saw their families again.
And two, that actually reminds me of a thing I wanted to ask you about. But first, I want to talk about this silly thing. So because this game is ostensibly taking place on Earth, the Earth is, what do you call it? A globe. So you can you can Pac-Man off the edge of the screen, right? Because it's a globe. So you have to think about that when you are seafaring, for example, or if there's land that connects the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen, like that is a viable option, because even though it is displayed as a two-dimensional, inexplicably isometric map, it is round. But they thought of that. And when you are creating a new game, one of the custom game options is called Flat World, where you can actually make it so that you are playing on a flat plane, which I think is super interesting because someone, maybe it was Sid Meier personally, someone said, hey, it would really change the nature of the game if you could put your back against a wall, right? Because normally that's not a thing you can do on a globe, because if your back is against the ocean, eventually people develop boats and air flight, right? So like you eventually get to a place where technology has made it so there are no mountains against which you can fortify. But if the world is flat, then you can actually do that. You could and the game lets you design your own scenarios and do these kind of interesting things where you can set the starting conditions. You can even save your current game as a scenario if you want to replay it later and see how it shakes out, which I thought was pretty cool. But I think it's really interesting to say, like, but what if the world was flat? What if you could be in Australia, but no one could ever come up from the southwest? They had to come down from the northeast. Like, that would have made Australia the most powerful continent on Earth, probably.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, and again, like I do and really, really like the degree of customization options you can do, because you're like, yeah, but what if this banana pants thing, or what if this other, like crazy situation? Like one of the things I have done a lot of in Civilization 6 is once, well, okay, so actually to come back, one of the things that this one didn't do, which is kind of a bummer, is that, all of the different AIs for the different civilizations change, but they're like, hey, who do you want to be? It's like, I want to be the Romans. It's like, cool, you're the Romans. All right. What do you want your cities to look like? I want them to look like this. Cool, that's what they look like. All right, now go play. Right. But being the Romans isn't, from a player perspective, isn't any different than being the Babylonians, isn't any different than there are no perks to being Romans, right? Which is changed in Civ 6. Like in Civ 6, if you're playing as the Romans, all of your cities have roads between them because all roads lead to Rome, stuff like that, right? And so I say that to say that in Civilization 6, it's fun because once you have internalized all of the different people and all of their quirks, you can then build the world to just funnel everything to you, right? So if it's like, hey, you can build this super powerful thing, but only on hills, it's like, then give me a world that is made of hills. Sure thing, boss. Now all of a sudden you sit upon a throne of, like, oh wow, this is a problem, right? Like, and so anyway, so I find that really increases the longevity of a game, especially for one like Civilization 2, where you can say, all right, I played through a few times, I'm feeling pretty comfortable with it. How can I push this to extremes, and they'll let you do that. And the other thing that they'll let you do, and we can either do your thing or do this, is they'll let you cheat. And we should talk about that.
We should talk about the cheating because one, I think it's super cool, and two,
yeah, it's fun.
I will capstone this other discussion with I wouldn't be surprised if the reason at this stage of this series development that they didn't make the player experience of a different culture any different is probably them playing it safe. Because if you think about how they executed this in Master of Orion, I think 1 and 2, it's a lot more like D&D races where it's like orcs are strong but dumb, and elves are magical but not as hardy, and dwarves are very high constitution. And that would not feel great to apply to like actual human cultures, to be like, Romans are smart and these other people are less smart, and these people are productive and these other people are like, that would, there'd be some very sketchy things that would probably creep in. So I wouldn't be surprised if they said, this is a coat of paint, right? You are and by default, I think the map you play on is not Earth-like, right? You have to ask for an Earth-like map, so you don't even get the potential geographical advantages of different cultures. And I think that was probably intentional, where someone was like, let's not decide that like this race is smarter or dumber or more productive or less productive than some other race. With alien races, you don't feel bad doing that, but with real human history, that would be bad.
Well, and actually what they did in Civ 6, which I think was great, is that they just did more tangential learning, which is that they say, like, so for example, the Genghis Khan, right? He is not like, it's not like you're great at killing people because that's what you do. You go kill people. It's like, no, but they do have the best mounted units in the game. So, and they have a specialty type of encampment that they can make because it's a type of encampment that they made. Like, it is a way that they were. So it's like it's optimal for you to play this in a warlike fashion because that's what they did. And culturally, there's a lot of things that they had that they developed that did that. But, I now know some words I don't know anymore. But to your point, right, is that I am sure in the mid 90s that was not going to necessarily occur to anyone initially.
Well, and the team on Civ 6, by the time they were making, Civ 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, like, this was an incredibly successful franchise. So you can bring in things like cultural advisors, right?
Right.
They can work with the game designers, whereas obviously this game had a much smaller team, as evidenced by the fact that no matter which civilization you are, your advisors are the same 6 white people because it's the people they filmed who probably worked in the office on this game, right? So like, they probably wouldn't do that anymore. If they were going to have real footage of real people, the people who are your advisors would probably look like the culture you're supposed to be from, not the same 6 white people from an office in LA or San Francisco or whatever.
Yeah, no, and actually one of the things that they because they did have different, they do have different playable cultures and all that sort of stuff in Civ 6. They one thing that I did notice that I was like, and I'm again, I'm not the person to point to something and be like, that's offensive, right? Because just I don't really have a whole lot of clout in that area, right? But all of the avatars are cartoon humans, right? But they really walk a fine line of making sure that they're cartooned in like an okay way, like I was looking at it, I was like, yeah, I think like maybe one or two of these could be considered offensive, not, oh, well, this person, we're going to give them this like, miserly look because they come from a culture of this thing, right? Or we're going to give this other person like a really strong look because, they're big dumb orcs, right? Or something like that, right? It's like, yeah, no, that way to thread that needle. And to your point, to bring it back, is that you can really only do that with cultural experts, not with Chad from accounting, like,
well, it's you just made me realize the word caricature is positive when it's singular, right? Like if you draw a caricature of Richard Nixon and you give him big jowls, then somebody would look at that and be like, oh, that's funny. That's Richard Nixon. He had, these kind of prominent jowls. If you draw a picture of, let's say Richard Nixon was Irish, I don't know. If you drew a picture of a generic Irish person with giant jowls and you were like, yeah, because every Irishman has giant jowls. It's like, no, caricature is fine when you are characterizing a specific person, because then it's like, oh, hey, we're all having fun here. But when you are characterizing an entire culture, and less fine. Let's talk about cheating. Cheating is awesome.
Cheating is awesome globally in all things forever.
Yeah, not just in this game. I just meant like, period. Just like a broad generalization.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was characterizing cheating.
Yeah. Like what is ethics? What is an ethics? It's a miserable pile of secrets. Anyways, but cheats. So yeah, there are cheats in this game. One, they don't even like try to, there are no cheat codes. It's just like, there's a menu dedicated to it, right? And it's right cheats. At the top. Yeah. It's right at the top with like build actions, if you're looking how to do fundamental things about the game, you are going to immediately recognize the fact that you can cheat, right? So I don't know, man. I like that because as opposed to like, being behind some closed door, it's like, yeah, man, play the game, cheat on the whatever you want to do, man. It's you paid for it, right? Like this is a distinct departure from a lot of the philosophy of the time. It's like, well, we got to make a game hard because otherwise, why are they going to keep playing? It's like, no, man, you already paid us. Play this game however you want, right? To me, my go-to cheat in this game was destroy all units at tile X. Love that cheat, man.
There's some elephants coming over here, and I don't really like that. So we're just gonna smite them from on high.
Well, so what happened to me in my first playthrough was I was playing as the Babylonian, or sorry, I was playing as the Romans, and the Babylonians, like at the beginning of the game, like everybody was coming to me like, hey man, give me $50. And I'm like, fine, whatever. And like, hey man, give me this like modicum of technology. I'm like, whatever, like just go away, leave me alone. I'm sciencing, right? And so from their seat, they're like, give me $50. I'm like, I have 2,000 gold. I do not care, But then at one point he said, hey, teach me how to gunpowder. And I said, oh no, we're not doing that. And he said, then it's war. And I was like, whatever, man. And then all of a sudden, a whole bunch of units came out of nowhere. And I was like, oh no, right? And so, but in Civilization 6, cities have a base defense strength, right? So, like if you want to take over a city, you need at least a couple of units that are of decent quality just to fight through the city. And then if they're garrisoned units and all this sort of stuff, it gets more and more difficult, right? But I was like, well, they're coming, but I can get my musketmen over there in like this amount of time and it'll be fine. And they just walked into my city and said, this is ours now. And I said, what?
Taking over cities is way too easy in this game.
Way too easy, which then again it incentivizes a certain warlike playstyle, right? So they just walked into the city and said, it's ours. And I said, no, it's not. And so then but because of that, they then got like access to a whole bunch of technology that I had, which was devastating. So I'm like, oh, well, before I could have taken your weird horsemen, but now you also have musketmen. And I was like, all right, we're done here. Smite. And, like, so basically what I did was I just walked back into, and so, but they took over like 2 other towns. So I like walked into that town, took that one back, and now I'm like swatting flies, and getting increasingly irritated. And so then, I took over there. This is kind of just going into the story, but I smote everyone in their capital city, and I walked into there. I was like, mine now, what? And they said, and so then they actually split into 2 different factions because this caused a civil war, right? And like, so now there's the Babylonians and the Sioux, and I was like, oh, all right. I mean, sucks to be you, man. And then the Sioux came to me and said, hey, how about some of that sweet, sweet peace? And I said, no, I am going to wipe you from this planet. And the Senate said, nah, super psych, we're cool with that. And I said, come on. And so then the Babylonians though came back and they were like, hey, so how about some peace? You got any of that peace? And I said, no, you started this, man. You sit in the corner and think about what you did while I wipe out every city on the globe. And the Senate said, nah, we like peace. And I was like, I'm so sick of you people.
Yeah.
And
feudalism it is.
It's like time to wind back the clock. But anyways, the moral of that story is that's why I enjoyed that particular cheat, because one of the things I always hate about 4X games is that person walking into my city and now suddenly getting all of my tech and all this sort of stuff, that's devastating, right? And that made me feel unhappy. And the amount of time I was going to spend feeling unhappy until I got the good, happy chemical drip of I have now sought vengeance and set the world back to being right in my mind's eye, that takes so much time. And I don't want to spend that much time because it's not proportional to the good, happy chemical I'm going to get when I actually get the job accomplished. So being able to twist that chemical on in my brain to say like, nah, smote, haha, like that was really nice. And I really liked it.
Well, I think you just made me realize that this game, almost definitely intentionally, but maybe the happiest of accidents, but this game is making different play styles not just equally accessible, but kind of treating them as equals in terms of like, do what you enjoy, right? And you could easily optimize the fun of the game by just cheating nonstop and not ever actually trying to tackle the problems of playing the game. But what I just realized from the way you were explaining that is this is why one of the end game conditions is survive until this year, because the goal that this game lays out is not take over the world. The goal that this game lays out is be a successful civilization. And one of the ways you can do that is by leaving the planet behind and becoming a spacefaring civilization. One of the ways you can do that is killing everyone and being the only civilization. And one of the ways you can do that is by learning to live in harmony with other civilizations, right? And then you kind of gray goo into one homogenous, we're all earthlings here. And that Earthicans, that makes certain things make more sense, right? Like why the game can end at 2020 is because that's a non-science, non-murder way. Like that's how you win through diplomacy, right? In Master of Orion 2, you literally have to convene everyone and say, elect a supreme ruler of the galaxy. Whereas in this game, it's once the world has reached stability, then we just consider that, okay, you did it, you reached stability, right? Because it's unrealistic, given the realistic setting of the game, to say we elected a president of Earth, right? That's not appropriate in this setting. And I like that because that just reminded me that one of the settings you can do in like the Flat Earth custom settings menu is you can do Bloodlust, where it turns off the other 2 endings and you have to win by becoming the dominant, the only civilization in the world. And so the game says, hey, by default, there are these 3 different ways to win. If what you want to do is cheat, we put those right over here, super easy to get to. If what you want to do is play this game like StarCraft, where you have to stamp out the scourge of every other culture on Earth, there's a checkbox for that right over here. And I just like, I'm kind of blown away by the maturity and sophistication of not just having those things exist in the game at all, which is already kind of like, hey, good job, but not making one the overwhelmingly obvious way to do it because the game is pushing you that way, and it makes the other ways like it yells at you for doing them, right? Like when you say, hey, I want to cheat, it just goes, hey, that's fine. Just so you know, next to your score, if you finish the game, it's going to say you played in cheat mode. Okay, here you go. Here's all the cheats, right? Just because there's no way to undo it, right? So it gives you a little Surgeon General's warning, but that's really impressive. It's really impressive when you think about it on that kind of like macro, we just want everybody to have fun here kind of scale.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And also too is one of the things that I liked about the cheats is it's basically an assist mode, right? But what I liked about it is that it's like you said, it asterisks your score, but that's it. It doesn't say, you know, oh well, now the game will never end, or there are these other ramifications that are, you know, huge unconscionable problems, right? So basically you can use it exactly the way that I used it, which is that let's just argue for a minute that so I was being vindictive, right? But let's just say if you're like, oh no, I didn't know that they could just walk into an undefended city. I need to fix that problem. All right, well, I'm going to smite everyone in this city and go take it back because I didn't know that. So I'm going to basically force the game to reset where it was to, you know, before this thing happened. And now I'm just going to play it out, you know, from there. So like literally you can just cheat back to where you feel, you know, like, so you don't lose the 4 hours you put into it up to this point. You can just be like, all right, you know what, actually wind it back a couple of turns, you know, before this thing happened, or I'm going to even this playing field, or, oh yeah, had I known that, I would have built more defensive units. So I'm going to go ahead and give each, you know, I'm going to generate a defensive unit in each area because that's what I would have done beforehand. Yes, that does give me a slight edge, but it evens it out, you know? So, yeah,
it's critical to be specific for someone who hasn't played this game or hasn't played this game in a long time, that the cheats are as targeted as you just described. You can say, finish researching the technology I'm currently researching, or finish building the thing I'm currently building, or give me this unit, right? But you can also say, show me the entire tech tree and I'll just check off the ones I want, right? So like you can do little scalpels or you can do giant sledgehammers. You can just edit how much money you have. If you're just like, you know what, I didn't really understand how taxes and production worked, and like now I'm way behind, and like I just want slightly more robust coffers, right? Or I screwed up and I accidentally switched to this other government and I don't want to do another revolt because like we're in the middle of producing military units or whatever. So just switch me to this other government. So being able to just completely turn it into a video game and just give yourself everything and then just march the armies of darkness all over the world like Sean Connery was afraid would happen. Like, yeah, you can totally do that. Or you can just say, you know what? I didn't understand the tech tree. I didn't understand how this unit worked. I didn't understand whatever, or I forgot, or I just want to play around with it or whatever, and just do these like little super targeted cheats. And they all get you the exact same penalty, right? You get the asterisk. If you do one little cheat, or if you just become the cheatingest cheater in all of Cheatington, it's just like, okay, this save file is now just one in which I use cheats, and I'm fine with that. I don't care.
So yeah, no, I thought that was very, very, very well done. And again, to me, completely changed my emotional state in the game, which was from that of I am frustrated and don't want to do this anymore to, well, that was a frustrating thing that happened, but I can now write the tables and not in the way that the game has decided is fair, but in the way I've decided is fair, you know? Just a couple of other like minor throwaway things. One is that I thought this was fascinating. From what I can tell, the computer AI, so, you know, there's the fog of war, right? You know where you're at, and then you got to explore. It's part of the game, right? From what I can tell, the AI knows when there are obstacles on a path that you've chosen that you don't necessarily know exist, you know?
So if you say like move 8 squares away into the darkness.
Yeah.
Then
if there's an obstacle, it'll, because I said like move 8 squares directly to the right, and it said sure, and it moved like north too, and I was like, wait, and it's getting around an obstacle I don't know exists, which is so again less realistic, but I actually prefer that. What they, in my opinion, Civilization 6 went in the wrong direction, which is they will assume a direct path, and then as the fog of war lifts, they'll change that, right? So what's really and literally, if any part of the fog of war is touching it, it'll pretend like it doesn't know. So you'll see what is clearly like a peninsula, but they're like, nah, man, but that might connect to this land you want to get to. So I'm just going to go right over there. It's like, you're going to run into an ocean, man. I'm telling you, you're going to run into an ocean. And it's really funny when you do the Earth map, because I know what that looks like, right? So I'm like, but the computer doesn't know, So I'm like, hey, go over here. And they're like, oh yeah, man, I'm just going to take a straight route. It's like, not unless you somehow know how to fly from Spain to Africa, because there's a big old body of water right there and you don't know how to cross it. So I actually preferred that. I thought that was nice.
Yeah, and there are a lot of things in this that are video gamey or are just like silly and just kind of there for levity's sake. And I can't think of any that really like rubbed me the wrong way, where I said, oh, that was a dumb video gamey way to handle that. Like, there might have been times where, because of Sour Grapes, I said that, but I think generally from like a game design standpoint, I was usually like, no, okay, like that's fine. Like, that's a video gamey way to handle that, but that's fine, right? The only place, I guess, and we already talked about it, is just the tech tree is weird, but it's not video gamey. It's just weird, right? It's like it required further refinement, throughout the later games. There's one thing I wanted to mention to you, just because I don't love it, and the main reason I want to bring this up is not because I have a ton to say about it in Civ 2, but it's like I want to know if they change this in Civ 6. I made a lot of logistical errors because of not understanding how certain things worked, because my mental model is very tied up in how Masters of Orion 2 does logistics, and this game does logistics in a super different way, super duper different way. And the thing that kept screwing me up was supporting units. So like this city is supporting like these units, and then sometimes something bad would happen, like a city would get invaded, and then I wouldn't have enough resources, and they would be like, oh, you lost these settlers because you didn't have enough resources to support this unit. And I was struggling to internalize that, because Masters of Orion makes no such distinction, right? Your whole society functions as a unit. So if this star system has super high production because of the type of planet and maybe you've enslaved the formics that are there or whatever, then you get like, that's your manufacturing wing, right? Like I build colony ships over there, but those colony ships are now not bound to that star system. That's dumb. It makes sense in the context of civilization, because it's like, yeah, how are you supporting these units when they're like out traveling? But I just was struggling to internalize the ability to say, okay, now that this unit is over here, I want it supported out of this city because that city is closer and they have a surplus of food and they can manage to support them, even though I built them out of this city. And so many settlers. I lost so many settlers because the city that built them was now struggling, and I should have switched them to being supported out of another city. So does Civ 6 change this, or do they just do away with this whole mechanic?
Yeah, they did away with it altogether.
Oh, thank God.
Masters of Orion bore out on that one.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Once you build a unit, it's that unit. It has a gold maintenance cost, but that's it.
But that just comes out of the general coffers.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Like yeah. So and I think that there's some type of a war weariness mechanic, but just again, for the record, I only play Civilization 6 on the easiest possible difficulty because I don't want to challenge. I want to come slowly take over the planet, feel good about myself, and then go to bed. But anyways, so there is something with like war weariness, which I think that, like if you're at war for too long, it'll cause people to be upset with you. But yeah, but no, I mean like, and that's one of the things that is interesting about Civilization. So with Civilization 2, I would say that mechanically they do incentivize for you to go take over the world, even if you're going for the science victory, right? Because more cities means more science, right? So it makes the most sense for you to do that. Oh, one thing I did want to mention really quickly, just as an aside, when you said you have to pull the Galactic Senate together in Masters of Orion, wasn't it always a blast when you had like so many more people than everyone else, and they're like, we want you to be the leader, and you're like, no, I want this other guy to be the leader. And it's like, oh, okay, but then he's going to win the game. Like, you submit to his rule. No. Yeah. It's like, well, we're all united against you. It's like, that's what I wanted. And then you exterminate the new unified race.
Yeah. Well, then you pull the sheet off of the first ever stellar converter and you're like, behold.
Behold what is about to happen to you. Anyways.
The number of times I have seen the planet getting cut in half animation.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Cause I mean,
good.
Because, I mean, hey, you can't terraform a toxic planet, but you can do an artificial one.
I know we talked about that when we played that game, but that is maybe the most psychopathic I have ever engaged in a video game, where I was just like, oh, there's one planet in this star system, and there's a couple other planets I don't really care for. So hey, you guys go colonize those planets.
Yeah. Or better, I will colonize that planet, and here is a gift. Wait one.
Yeah. Yeah. Deep issues that game could unearth.
Yes. Yeah. It's just kind of like you and then Smash cuts to you with your therapist, and their like mouth is open, and
get out. You are beyond help.
So anyway, taking over cities is the ideal way to go. One of the things, though, that they do in Civilization 6 that mitigates that advantage is that the more cities that you have, the harder it is, the more it costs to build districts that build science or money or whatever. So there is a point where it's like, hey, if you got 5 cities, that's optimal. If you go conquer more cities, it'll actually slow down the production in your existing cities,
See, that sounds like a refinement of the supported units mechanic, right? Is what they wanted is there needs to be some sort of external pressure on expansion. And the way that manifests in Civ6 is it sounds like, oh, it's harder to have these districts, and there's downsides to the way, like, if your districts aren't set up right, then that causes these other problems. And the way it manifests in Civ2 is, oh, you have like literal supply lines between you and all of your units, and so there's a limit to how many units a given city can support, and then that causes like these other problems. And I don't like the supported units manifestation of that external pressure. Like I do think for the way the game functions, there needs to be an external pressure that makes unlimited, as rapid as possible expansion not the one and only way to win, because then otherwise that's just what you would do. And every game would end in the year 5000 BC when we have the biggest rocks and the heaviest clubs, and we just went and clubbed everybody's heads in, right? So like that wouldn't be fun. But I don't like the supported units implementation of that external pressure.
Yes. So the one final note that I have, and then we can talk about you had a thing tied to gunpowder that you wanted to go over.
I did. My God. Oh, it was basically we sort of had like a roundabout version of the discussion with the tech tree, which is just like I don't love the way the tech tree is implemented, because it's like kind of confusing. And granted, they put all the information in front of you so you can figure it out, right? But it's just, again, it's not Masters of Orion 2, and for you it's not Civ 6, right? So it's like, it's just you don't fit my mental model. But I did think it was interesting once I understood, like, oh, getting from here to guns allows this certain style of like hyper aggressive, basically unstoppable gameplay. I was like, oh, that's pretty close to a first order optimal strategy. Like, which sucks, because that's kind of how it actually shook out, right? Like the first people who got guns like caused a lot of problems for all the people who didn't have guns, and then the first people who got tanks and atomic weapons caused a lot of problems for people who didn't have tanks and atomic weapons. So it's the game, for better or worse, does an actually pretty accurate job of like reflecting the way history has actually borne out, which is cool. But the way it manifests in the tech tree is so kind of jank that it creates this weird, like, oh, we have guns, but we haven't discovered pottery.
Right. Well, and actually what they do in Civ 6 is fascinating with that, is that not only do you need the technology in order to build the unit, but you need the resources to build the unit. And not as in like food, but as in like iron. Like you have to have an iron mine, if you want to build swordsmen because they have iron swords, right? And which is funny because the other thing that they do, which I think in Civilization 6, which they don't do here, is that until you research the technology to know what that thing is, you don't know where it is on the map, right? So, because that would make sense, right? Because you're like, it doesn't show you where uranium deposits are because this is just a rock to you until you learn what uranium is, you know?
It's a glowy, herdy rock.
Well, that's actually the problem. Is it's not a glowy, herdy rock. It's just a rock, but it's cursed because everybody who holds it dies early. You know, it would be easier if it was the rock from Star Trek that Beverly Crusher fell in love with. You know,
so you find this rock and you discover polytheism because you now think rocks are cursed, and then later you discover uranium, but it's the same rock.
Exactly right. Different approaches, different strokes, you know. But anyways, I say all that to say that what's interesting sometimes is you'll be like, yes, I'm going to create, you know, iron swordsmen who will then, you know, be like awash the world with my glory, right? And so you say like, yes, now research on iron mines, and it does it, and you look around, you go, I don't own any iron mines. Well, damn it.
Which is backwards, right? Like the parts of the world that developed iron weaponry did so because they discovered iron, not they didn't develop the idea of iron weaponry and then went, crap, we don't have any iron near here.
No, this is a problem. But again, like the nice thing is that it does again curtail that strategy, because if you don't have access to iron, then you know, and what they want you to do is they want you to go and trade and stuff like that, right? But that never works. So I say all that to say the one other thing, and again, is the way I remember this back in the day, so much so that when I first started playing Civilization 6, I said, Pangea. I want to play on Pangea because I don't want to ever deal with water ever, because trying to get units across water is a godforsaken nightmare.
I remember having a similar feeling when we played StarCraft, and every time it was like, oh, you got to put a bunch of Marines into this dropship. I was like, no, why? Nope. And there's so many missions where you must do that, and I hated them.
Hated everyone. And so because what they do in Civilization 6, which is amazing, is units can embark, right? So if you put the unit into water, it just the boats come, right? The boats just become the boats. Now, what it does is it severely reduces their attack ability, right? So they're, you know, because they're on boats, right? Boats aren't reduced by being on the water. So it behooves you, if you're afraid of being attacked on the water, to have an escort with them, right? But you don't have to, right? But yeah, the minute I said, like, I came to the water and I got this like uneasy feeling, I said, oh no, I'm worried. And then I clicked on the water and I said, hey, can you just, it's just one tile of water and I see land right over there. Can you, you know, maybe just hop in and go over there? And they said, and I was like, oh no, I'm not building the ship. So I guess that area is just off limits to me. You know, like this is, again, Wakanda forever, man. Like, let's do this.
Yeah, I didn't get to experiment with custom maps, or I just did like randomized, right? Because that's the way I remember playing, and that's the like happy path. Like when you're starting a new game, that's one of the defaults. I did seriously want to do the Australia like super science Wakanda strategy where it's like, we are the only people who start on this landmass and everyone else starts on Pangea. So they can all interact with each other and cause each other problems. And I'm just over here, and like, we will be like aliens to them when we show up with our hyper futuristic technology because they haven't been able to fully science. So I didn't get to, I wanted to play through one game like that and I didn't get to, but I mean, I know how it would shake out. It would essentially shake out like cheating because it's cheating with extra steps.
That it is. The one other thing, a side note, I'll say just about like Civilization 6, where you said like, what's always interesting is when you do that, if you say like, I'm going to play as Australia, and everybody in Europe's wailing on each other. So eventually you go over to Europe, right, with your death robots and the thing is, I always find fascinating is you'll meet like Frederick Barbarossa of the Germans, and he's like, you know, it's good to meet you. As you can see, here's my home nation of Brussels, and there's Berlin, and there's Paris under German control, and you're like, Paris, huh? What an odd name for that city. I would like more information on that because it's like, and you just see the cities that they've taken over time, and you're like, hey, I don't think you came up with the name Paris, man. There's something dark going on there.
How different was the feeling between losing a city versus losing your capital city? Like the swelling of nationalism that rose up in me when someone would like take over Rome or, take over whatever my capital city was. It's just like, oh no, some random city was taken over. Oh, the capital was taken over. Well, I've now conscripted 100% of my citizens into the military, and we are taking back Rome.
Yeah, no, which is kind of what Rome did when Hannibal came through. So
that is true. Yeah,
yeah. So good on you. Way to stay in character. Anything else?
No, we could talk about how it held up. It held up. So I will say with some caveats. First off, no nostalgia goggles required. Like this game is honestly, I think probably way ahead of its time for its time, which is part of the reason why it's so playable today. The places where you will run into issues are actually things that have only recently started to really be addressed in 4X games, which is you got to do some reading, you got to do some trial and error, you got to like figure out what stuff does. And I don't think that is as much a problem of the time in this game as it is in like a platformer or an RPG or whatever, because that is how these games are. There's a lot of systems, they're complicated, and they want you to learn them and experiment with them so that you can develop interesting strategies that you find engaging. And if you don't find that kind of gameplay engaging, you will probably not enjoy this game, right? Civilization 6, the newer Master of Orion, the remake or whatever, like newer 4X games probably are more amenable to like baby mode, where if you want to just go in and be like, it's like a strategy game, you can do that. But then they also have all of the super hard stuff, right? This game, you still have to do the homework. You still have to do the reading. You still have to click on the cheat menu, right? Like there are things where you have to put in the effort, but it's not because the game is poorly designed. It's because it is coming to the table and honestly saying, this is what I need out of you. If you want to enjoy my video gaminess, this is what you need to bring to the table. So I don't consider that a dated mechanic. I don't consider that a failing of game design. I think it's just part of 4X games is they're friggin' complicated. So the biggest drawback to this game is just the shockingly dated graphics that did not age well at all, right? Like that alone might make you say like, maybe go play 3 or 4 if you want a classic Civ, but you want one that is like less grainy. But if you have fond memories of this game, or if you like Civ 6 and you're curious about the classic Civs, this game's great. Like surprisingly advanced for what it was trying to do, which is why I think the later Civ games are so good, is because this is the friggin' foundation they were building on. Like just
right.
Absolutely amazing. There were a lot of things that I personally found frustrating because they didn't fit my mental model, but they were never the game's fault, right? It was always like, oh, I came in with a bunch of preconceived notions, made a stupid decision, and then paid for it, right? As I said earlier, like I fucked around and found out. So that's not the game's fault. It's not a game design problem. And in this genre specifically, screwing around and finding out is like an expectation of the player. So I probably won't spend a ton more time with it. I do want to dedicate now finally a little bit of my limited gaming time to Civ 6 because I'm now like, oh, okay, like now I want to see. But yeah, no nostalgia goggles required. It was good.
He's good. I would also say no nostalgia goggles required. Again, with a minor caveat, which is that to your point, right? Is should you go back and play this game? Yes, absolutely, you can. It holds up. My recommendation would be go play Civilization 6 because it does everything that this game does, but it's with all of the modern amenities, so if you want to go back and rough it camping in the woods, then go for it. Right. But if your goal is to have a nice, relaxing weekend, go glamping. Don't go and rough it with just, don't do the Michael Scott where you're thrown off into the woods with, just a hunting knife and toothpick, Anyway, but yeah, that's the thing, is that the game absolutely, it's fun, it's enjoyable. Again, I think that to me, one of the big game changers is the cheat mode, just because, again, if there's a thing you don't like about the world, change it at the beginning, change it in the middle, change it at the end, do whatever you want to do. So if somebody came to me and said, like, hey, I don't like Civilization 2, I played it and it doesn't hold up, I'd say,
the curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player 2 there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creep in with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day than on all the experience gained.